Bring in Trevor Aaronson, who is the co-director of the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting. He's also author of The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism. Good to see you, Trevor. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You wrote in your book, every year the FBI spends $3.3 billion on counterterrorism, running operations against would-be terrorists. And you argue it's not all that effective. Why not?
Well, the problem is that the FBI is catching a lot of so-called terrorists or would-be terrorists through sting operations. The problem is that the people they're catching don't have the capacity for violence. They don't have any connections to al-Qaeda. And in many cases, the FBI informant or undercover agent induces them to move forward in their crime. You know, in the decade after 9/11, 150 defendants were caught in sting operations where the evidence showed there wasn't a suggestion that they would have been able to commit their crime without the FBI providing the means and the opportunity. At the same time, they're pursuing cases such as those. The FBI has been missing truly dangerous terrorists, such as Fayez Shahzad, who delivered a bomb to Times Square, Nidal Hassan, who killed 12 people at Fort Hood, and then most recently, obviously, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who they investigated in January 2011, deemed not a threat, and then let him go, only to find that a year or so later, he drops bombs at the Boston Marathon.
But as you look at this, was there a point at which, in the case of Tsarnaev, for example, there was something so obvious? Because at least what I've read and the arguments I've heard from people in that community, they say, look, there are literally thousands of threats coming in like this, and you make these assessments, and our assessment showed, you know, there was no, not only just necessary imminent danger, but they had no legal way to move forward with the surveillance.
That has been what the FBI has said in Tsarnaev's case, but let me give you a specific example of what happened in January 2011 in Boston. That's when the Russian government came to the FBI and to the CIA and said they were concerned about Tsarnaev. They believed he may have connections or sympathies with international terrorist groups. And they investigated him, they looked at his internet history, and deemed he wasn't a threat. At the same time, there was an FBI informant who was a heroin addict and was being paid to provide information to the FBI, and he came to them with a man named Rezwan Firdaus, who said he wanted to fly a remote-controlled airplane laden with grenades into the U.S. Capitol and destroy the Gold Dome. It was a fantastical plot, and actually Rezwan Firdaus had no means to actually move forward in it. He had no money, he had no access to explosives, he had no connections to international terrorists at all. And instead of pursuing Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the FBI conducted a 9-month sting operation on Rezwan Firdaus, where they gave him the money to purchase the airplane. They gave him money to travel from Boston to Washington, D.C. to scout out locations from which to launch his weapon. And then in the final stage, they gave him all of the explosives he needed, everything he needed for his plan, and then arrested him. And in a case like that, here's a man...
But do you think they would have looked at a Tsarnaev and said, I mean, here's a guy with the money and the means? I don't know. Was he someone? He certainly didn't have a lot of money. He certainly didn't have a big track record. So I'm not sure exactly what, you know...
Unlike many people caught in these sting operations, Tsarnaev came to the FBI's attention through a pretty legitimate source, that being the Russian government. At the same time, there was evidence to suggest he was traveling to Chechnya and Dagestan, areas where militant extremists are active, and there were certainly better reasons to believe that he might be involved or sympathetic to international terrorist groups than someone like Rezwan Firdaus or many of the other people caught in these sting operations. What's becoming clear in these sting operations is that the FBI is finding people who will commit acts of terrorism when given the opportunity and the means by the FBI. These people are often economically desperate, mentally ill. At the same time, they're missing truly dangerous threats, such as Tamerlan Tsarnaev and, you know, for example, Fayez Shahzad, the man who delivered the bomb to Times Square.
And your investigative reporting showing the challenge, the real challenge facing the U.S. anti-terror community and the president as he gets ready to give this speech. Trevor Aaronson, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course, thank you.
Let me bring in EJD on Washington Post.